this.
Okay.
We're good? Okay.
All right.
I am Jean Richardson. We're in Waverly, Iowa with Marianne Waldstein. It is March 22nd, 2013. Marianne, where and when did you attend country school?
I attended country school, Coon number 8.
Coon, like C-O-O-N?
Yes, Coon number 8 for a couple years, and then Grant number 4 in Grant Township. Coon number 8, of course, was Coon Township, and then Grant Township in Buena Vista County, near Storm Lake, Iowa.
Do you have any idea how many years?
I graduated from 8th grade from country school. That was in 1942. I attended there from 4th through 8th in Grant Township. And otherwise I went to Storm Lake Public School for a few months, and kind of an interesting thing, I couldn't learn how to read. I was deathly afraid of my teacher in 1st grade. Of course, in those days we didn't have kindergarten. And I just couldn't learn how to read.
And that was being in country school?
No, that was in
town
the
school?
town school. And in March, my parents moved over to Coon Township onto a farm, and that was in March. And from March to May, this wonderful teacher, Miss Jensen, just absolutely marvelous. The first thing she said to me was, "Oh, Marianne, you print your name so nicely." She said something nice to me. And then I started working, and she sent home books during summer. I came back, and I was studying, and she could see that I was doing everything. I was alone in 2nd grade. And she could see I was doing all the 3rd graders' work on the board. So the superintendent came out and tested me. I think must have been October. And I skipped 2nd and went to 3rd, and I could not read in March of 1st grade. What one teacher can do, it's just marvelous. And I called her many, many years later and thanked her for being such a good teacher, and she was my role model, really. So,
how far away did you live from your two schools?
From the Coon school, it was only about a half a mile. But from the one in Grant Township, it was 1.5 miles, south and west. It was a half mile south and a whole mile west. And I'm telling you, in the below zero in that wind and going west for a mile, oh, I remember, in fact, I know I frostbit my fingers and toes, because to this day, when the first part of the winter starts, I have to be real careful not to get my fingers cold, or they'll just turn white and tingle, something terrible. So,
what tasks did you have to perform before you went to school?
Well, for a while, milking cows when I was a little older, and getting home from school then, always, when we had to make our beds, of course, but that was upstairs. It was so cold up there. Water would freeze in the glass, overnight if you took water up. But in the evening, late afternoon, when you came home from school, of course you had to grind a pail full of corn for the chickens and help milk again, and all kinds of chores. But then in the later years, in the 40s, when we got a radio with a battery, I'd try to sneak in listening to Camp Midnight or Jack Armstrong, or one of those before Dad called. It was time to get out there and do chores. So those are kind of fun things to remember.
What did you wear to school?
In the fall, my dad and Mom always was so kind of shy and everything, so Dad always did like the shop. And I usually got like 3 dresses, cotton dresses, and that lasted all year. And Mom and sometimes you'd almost grow out of them, and she'd she'd maybe put a little panel in or something, but they were always clean and pressed and starched. And then you'd have a sweater to wear over, and then in this winter it'll be your long stockings and all those things, long underwear.
Would you have worn each dress twice then during the week that you had 3
Oh, at least.
before they were laundered?
Mm-hmm. And when you got home from school, you'd change clothes right now into your chore clothes. You never wore your school dresses. My gosh, you had to take good care of things.
Do you remember what time you would have left for school?
Oh my. We didn't start school till 9 o'clock. So I imagine I left, a quarter after 8? Did it take 45 minutes to walk a mile and a half? I really can't remember. Maybe it was a little sooner. Yeah, you had to get up early in the morning, and go to bed early at night.
How did you get to school?
Get to school walking. And the colder it was, the more you had to walk because the car wouldn't start usually when it was below 0 or something like that. I only missed 5 days in 12 years. And 2 of those days was because when I was in high school, I went to town and worked for my room and board. And, you didn't get paid or anything, but you did laundry, cleaning, take care of the kids, all those things, just so you could stay in town with them and go to school. And, what was I?
Well, you're talking about you'd only missed 5 days of school.
Oh, yes, 2 of those, that when I was a senior, the people I worked for, she had a baby, and I had to stay home and take care of the little one for 2 days before she came home from the hospital. So 2 of those days I wasn't ill.
Or work days.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, we used to go to school, with colds and things. That didn't stop us. And we had handkerchiefs, not Kleenex, and all those kind of things.
Did you have anyone to walk with?
Some of the way. Not the first half mile at all. And then down around the corner, we had friends named Romines, and sometimes I could get a ride with them. But often not, because they left earlier, because he took a daughter to town, I think, for a couple years there to high school. And so then he dropped his other child off at school, and then I walked myself. So, and then there was one other family later on, but other than that, it was pretty barren from our place to school.
How would you spell Romaines? Do you know?
Romine, Romine. Delilah was the girl closest to me.
Do you remember anything about those walks? Any of the sights or the
Oh,
sounds?
yes.
Besides the cold.
Oh, I loved it in the spring when the birds, the meadowlarks, and you don't see many meadowlarks anymore. Meadowlarks and robins and goldfinch. Oh, that was really neat to hear them singing, and then see some of the little wildflowers poking through in the ditches. But in the winter time, you never went in the ditches on the way to school because you'd be so sopping wet otherwise. But on the way home, after a blizzard and these beautiful big snowbanks, you just couldn't stay out of them. You had to go, and you'd come home all just wet, soaked through. And then you'd hear the cows mooing. You'd hear all these different dogs barking, the neighbors' dogs barking, and we always had a dog and always came running out to see you when you came by the gate. And that was always fun to see Pal. Pal was one of our main ones. Tippy was another one. It was mostly German Shepherds we had. And Tippy had a white tip on the tail. That's how Tippy got her name.
Let's talk about your schoolhouse.
Yes.
Describe your schoolhouse and its surroundings.
Okay. It was on the corner of a section, and the county allowed a certain amount. I can't remember if it was an acre exactly, but all of them got on the corner of it. And they were located like every 2 miles, so no child had to walk more than 2 miles. And it was close to the corner, and then and then behind it were the outhouses, and in the middle of the boys and the girls was a big cob shed or coal shed where you kept for the fires, for the stove. That was part of our jobs we had to do at school too, was go get the coal and the cobs and so forth. And we were not fortunate enough to have a well on our school grounds, so we took turns. We had to walk to the neighbors and get water. Can you imagine? And the one across the road, their well became really bad, so then we had to walk about a quarter to half a mile to get water. And 2 children would carry the pail. And I think back, there wasn't a lid, and the cars would go by in the dust. We never thought anything of it, And we drank out of the same, when we used to drink out of the same. Then later on, in the later years, everyone had their own cup with their own name, usually a tin cup, and you hung them on the wall. And where that took place was in one of the cloakrooms. And everybody had a hook with their name on it. And, okay, we had 2 cloakrooms. Now, we never used the one door in the one cloakroom. That was always closed up because that's where your water pail and all that stuff was. So everybody went in the one. That usually was the boys where they hung there, and usually the girls were back in the other one. We had, in between the 2 cloakrooms, inside was a little stage, probably, just about a foot high was all. And sometimes the teachers had their desk back there, but not my good teacher. She didn't do that. She had her desk up over near, because in the front then were mostly the blackboards, and on the sides were blackboards. And then we had a little library. I tell you, it was probably 4 feet wide, and maybe only about 4 or 5 shelves hung on the wall. And I think I read every single book in that whole library, and there were some very good books. By the time I graduated from 8th grade, I just loved to read. And by that time, and then of course our desks were on like pieces of wood, so you could slide them over and clean, and then slide the whole row. They were on rows. And the small desks in the front and the bigger desks in the back. Now, the desks that I just surely disliked, they were the kind with the older kids, and you picked up the desk and it hooked. But underneath then, there was a rack across, and you stuck your books on. Well, if your partner wanted a book or anything, you'd both have to take everything off. And that was one of the dumbest things. They could have made it, cut it in half so you did your own. But no, it was one across. So we always, we'd vie for getting a regular desk if we could, because there were just a few of those. And oh my, what else? Curtains on the windows, but we didn't have electricity, so of course we had, actually, in my school, I don't remember, we had lamps, but I don't think she hardly ever lit. When it was a real dark day, we'd all kind of push the desks over near the windows and open those curtains so we get as much light as we could. And the teacher adjusted. She maybe didn't have us do as much. She had us do different kind of work. And maybe she would do more speaking or something rather than us. It was wonderful to go to a country school, I think. Those teachers were absolutely marvelous. I did get to teach in a museum country school. We brought one to Buena Vista County in Storm Lake, and we brought a school in there. Then we had third graders from the whole county at different times. I believe there were about 4 of us, and we made the schedules like we remembered how it was in country school, and then we shortened them to half days sometimes. Sometimes they got a whole day. And we had the children dress in overalls and long dresses and things like that from really the old times. And that was a fun thing to do. But a teacher had to be very innovative because she taught all 8th grades if she had children in all 8 grades. And that's where I learned where I wanted to be a teacher, because when you get to be an older student, you got to help the little ones. And when you got your work finished, and I just loved that. So that's where I learned how I wanted to be a teacher already when I left 8th grade.
Career education.
Yes, it was. Definitely career education.
Let's talk about the schoolyard too. Any playground equipment?
We had we didn't have very much. But we did have, what did we call it? Where you hung on to and ran around and you would swing around. That's where we had a maypole dances always on May 1st. The teacher, oh my, she did a lot of things like that where you go. I forget what that was called. You know, I don't remember swings at Grant number 4. But we all played together. We played ball every time you could possibly do it. In the winter time, we played fox and goose. The little ones and the big ones, everyone played together. It was just wonderful. And then choosing up sides, oh my goodness, that was always a big deal. And then there'd always be 1 or 2 that would be last to be chosen. So if I got to choose, sometimes I'd choose them first, because I just felt so sorry for them.
You were a teacher long before I was a teacher.
Yes.
Trees on the playground?
All around the edge, but none on the playground itself.
Flagpole?
Pardon?
Flagpole.
Oh, yes. Oh, definitely. Oh, that was we always said Pledge of Allegiance every morning. Well, that was inside too. We had a flag, but there was always a flagpole outside. And that was a big treat to go out and be able to put the flag up. And that was only older children got to do that, like 7th and 8th graders, because you didn't dare let it touch the ground or anything, and you had to be very careful. And then inside, we Pledge of Allegiance every morning. And of course, every country school I've ever seen had George Washington and Abraham Lincoln pictures up on the wall in the front. And we always learned about them. I have, the other day I gave it to Roger Wilcox, an 8th grade examination from 1870-something. I am a college graduate and I could not answer all those questions. So when people said, I only had an 8th grade education in the late 1800s, early 1900s, that was a good education. They learned a lot of facts. Of course, they couldn't look anything up like on the computer or anything. They had to know it, But they had a 6-hour exam, and it was geography, history, orthography, spelling, language, and civics, mathematics, those. And it was about an hour each exam. And they didn't take it all in one day. But when I graduated from high school, we had to go to town, to the courthouse, and that was for 3 different days. And we took exams, and we had to pass those before we could go to high school. And I don't think the town kids had to do that. So, my 8th grade teacher was marvelous, Miss Anderson. Oh, she was another wonderful one. And the one I had 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th, didn't know English or math very well. So we were all very kind of poor in English and math because if we got if it didn't match the answer book, she didn't really know how to tell us how to do it. She just marked it wrong. So that, and I won't mention her name. So that, our teacher just worked and worked. In 8th grade, she came and it was absolutely marvelous.
Now, you said your parents were German. Were
Yes.
they first generation?
Yes, they came over. My dad came over in 1920, and they were engaged in Germany. And then he was going to make all this money, and the streets were paved. He barely scraped up enough money for a one-way ticket, and Mom came all by herself. And she came, and they were married here. And then we 3 kids were born here. I have a sister 7 years and 2 months older, and a brother 7 years and 2 months younger.
So was German spoken in your home?
Yes.
So English, so was that an issue in school?
No, my sister was 7 years older, and so by the time I came along, they were speaking more, and they wanted to be good Americans, and they wanted to speak English and everything. And then, of course, when I was in school, then, of course, it was World War II in 41, and that's when I was in 7th grade. Oh, there were some really bad times, and I know one time the kids called me a Nazi and things. Oh, it was really, really, really sad. But my parents were very good Americans. In fact, my dad was in the Des Moines Register saying he's raising hogs for the, for the country and all this, and they were Dad was very involved, like in Farm Bureau and crop, after the war, where they sent food to the countries, and he did a lot of those kind of things. And Mom was in Germany, she was a cook for some rich people. She had gone to cooking school even. So she was a marvelous cook. And such a sweet lady. She never said anything bad about anyone. She always would see the good in everybody.
What did you do once you arrived at school? First thing in the morning.
First thing in the morning, well, we hung up our clothes and, our 8th grade teacher was absolutely marvelous. She said you could bring a potato and put it on the stove. That was the most marvelous thing that anybody ever did. We could have a baked potato at lunch. And she was so good. We finally got electricity we got electricity just before the war. And our farm too. That January 1942, they hooked us up because all the lines were run to our farm. Otherwise, we would have had to wait till about 1946 to get electricity. So we were so fortunate. And they had it in school. So she brought a hot plate and actually made soup when it was when it was below zero weather. So we had hot lunch once in a great while, which was very unusual because otherwise you took your sandwich and apple that you'd had picked from the trees and wrapped in paper and put, in a barrel in the basement, in the cellar, and you took your apple and your sandwich, and I can't even remember now. That was about it. A couple sandwiches.
A cookie.
Your apple, and a cookie, and that's about it.
What kind of paper did you wrap your apples in?
Newspaper for in the barrel.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and of course in those days we didn't have Ziploc bags or anything. We had waxed paper to put the sandwiches in. And then you had your lunch pail. And I think back how foolish that was to have to carry that lunch pail. Why didn't we have backpacks and things? Oh my.
Gotten smarter.
Right.
What did you do when you first got to school then?
Okay, we got to school and took off our clothes, and if we had any choice, if you had to go get water or if you had to go out, bring in any fuel or anything. Teacher did some of that, but then she left some for us. Then we'd sit down, and then she'd begin the day, and we got up and we pledged allegiance. Oh, we also had health check. I forgot all about that. We all had to put our hands, and she'd come and check our fingernails, and you had to show your teeth, that you brushed your teeth, cleaned your fingernails, and what was there anything else? I think those are the main. And your hands. Your hands should be clean, fingernails clean, and your teeth brushed, and your hair combed. That was one of the very first. And if you didn't, she'd send you back to where the little wash basin was and stuff, and you had to wash your hands. And so, okay, that was health check. I'd kind of forgotten about that. And the Pledge of Allegiance, of course, was very first. And then lots of times you'd sing a song. You could sing. We didn't sing the national anthem that much. That's difficult. I think America. Well, we had our good music books. I still have that, I believe. And we'd pick out a song or two, one or two to sing. And I can't remember what the next thing. We didn't have anything like show and tell, and I don't believe in those days. I don't remember doing it. Then our assignments, and she of course would have assignments on the board. The teacher worked very hard getting all those things. You had to be a good organizer, or it would have been chaos. Most of my teachers were good organizers. Thank heavens. So, and then she'd call the different classes up. First, everybody had their tasks to do. Maybe a workbook or worksheet or whatever, and the assignment to read so many pages and this and this. Then she would call a class up and have class there while you were all working. And then you'd go back to your seat and another class would go up. She would have chairs. In one place there was a little bench, and you could sit on that, or little chairs. And you could do board work. Sometimes she had she'd even have math problems on the board maybe. And then it would be recess time, and we'd all put on our clothes and go outside and play. Annie over the schoolhouse. And as I said before, it depended on what time of the year it was. You'd play fox and goose in the snow and all those different kind of things. And oh my goodness, one time the teacher let us get some extra. Can you imagine? Nowadays this would be, you couldn't do that. But she let us get some extra water and put it so we could all slide. And nowadays, of course, somebody might get hurt, so you couldn't do that anymore. But we actually had a big slide. And everybody lined up and took turns. No problem. Once in a while, boys would maybe get in a fight or something, but it never lasted long. And the teacher always made them apologize and find out what caused it and take care of it. She was a major counselor, too.
We've talked a little about the inside of the classroom with the desk and the cloakroom. Did you have a Victrola?
Oh, yes.
And a piano?
No, we weren't fortunate enough to have a piano.
Sand table?
No. That's pretty fancy.
And you talked about the school had a library, 4 or 5 shelves with the books. Mm-hmm. Did you have individual slates that you were
No, by that time we had those big chief paper tablets. And were we careful? We used the front and the back side. And we were taught not to waste. Waste not, want not. And our pencils, we were so careful. It was so exciting to get a new pencil. and go to the sharpener and sharpen that pencil. And we always had to get permission to go sharpen your pencil. You had to get permission to go to the bathroom. You had to get permission to run around. You didn't run around the school. Well, you could. You know, if everybody was milling around, you couldn't learn. So, and here the teacher was teaching and giving permission and all of this. What you know, what a wonderful organizer she was. Then, okay, the rest of them, at noon we would eat lunch, and we had a whole hour, and so that was a fun time. One of the most marvelous things, our 8th grade teacher taught us sex education. There were 5 of us in our class, 1 boy and 4 girls. So she was so wise. She, in the spring, she would say, girls, let's have, during the noon hour, and she'd say, let's have a little visit. I'd like to visit with you. And she was so marvelous. She was a very Christian woman. Actually, I learned the whole book of John in country school. We could go early and learn so many verses. I don't know where she got this, and I'm sure it was all her own money and everything. And we would learn so many verses, and then a chapter, and then you'd get like a pencil with some Bible verses on it. And then when you finished the chapter, you got this wonderful book. And I am so disgusted with myself that I finally, after many years, got rid of those books. They were all nice little books. They were about this big and about that thick, and they all were such moralistic stories. They were just marvelous. Some of them were about a poor little girl, you know, like Little Match Girl, and some of those. It wasn't that story, but similar. And they were absolutely marvelous books. They taught good values. And then after each chapter we got that book. How many chapters are in the book of John? I've forgotten now. But anyhow, then when we finished all of it, then we got some kind of a certificate. And I never could find mine after that. But that was on her own. And then for our sex education, she would say, you know, when a boy kisses you, sometimes you get these tingly feelings and all that. She was so wonderful. You didn't feel embarrassed or anything the way she did it. It was just marvelous. Then she'd say, go home and talk to your parent, to your mom, and tell her what we talked about. Oh, honestly, it was really great.
What kinds of items did you and your families have to provide? The Big Chief tablet?
Yeah, yes. Actually, we had, in country school, we had to go to the town, to a drugstore, and they had all these supplies on big shelves. She gave us a list. And then we had our own box of crayons. Oh my, was that a wonderful thing. A box of crayons, a little pencil case with maybe 2 pencils in it, and an eraser. Let's see, we had to have, when you're older, you had to have a
compass or protractor?
A protractor and a compass and a ruler, your Big Chief tablet, and then any books and workbooks that came together. And your parents had to pay for that.
So most all of your textbooks your parents bought?
Oh, yes. And then what did we do? It seems like, did we take them? So you took really good care, and one of the first things most of the teachers had you do at school, you made covers for your books, like out of paper sacks and things, and you could decorate them, and you knew not to mark in your book. You did not make marks in your book. I believe we took them back it seems to me like in the fall when you went to get your new things, it seems like we took them back and you were allowed a certain amount of money, 35 cents or something for your book, and they'd look and check how good the book was, and then if it wasn't good at all, they wouldn't take it back. So that was frugal. Very good. Recycle.
Recycle.
We did recycling a lot in those days.
So you thought the school day began at 9?
Till 4.
Till 4.
And you know, in the wintertime, you had to scurry to get home before dark. Well, actually, sometimes it was dark like when you got home. No, we didn't have... No, it wasn't complete. It wasn't ever dark when you got home. It was just regular time, I guess. We didn't have daylight. Yes, we did start that when I was in high school, I believe, daylight savings time.
Especially during the war.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why it got started, so that you could, let's see, save on energy somehow.
You've already told me quite a bit about your school day. Anything else we should talk about how the teacher organized the school day's lessons? She'd start with the young children?
Yes, she started with the little ones, and then they could go back, and then she'd give them their assignment, what to do in the back. Yes, and then in the afternoons, we always did reading and math, your harder subjects in the morning when everyone was more fresh and everything. In the afternoons, and she'd work in music, art. I know every month, I forgot about that too. Every month she gave us a sheet with a calendar. I remember especially February had heart for every day, and then you'd fill in your dates and you'd color nicely, you know. And then you could mark off each day as it went by. Like the first, you put an X on it, and so forth. We paid a lot of attention to weather, and you know, even when the weather was bad, we had school. I don't remember too many days being called off. It's really amazing when you think about it.
You were walking anyway.
Yeah. So, although I do remember 1936, and that was still when I was in first grade. That was still when we were going to the town school. We didn't have school for a month because of the blizzards and the huge snow and everything.
Did you have to make that up, or did you have to get out because of the farm help? Do you know
That was in first grade.
Yeah, I mean, but would the school have continued to hold school?
No,
to make up those days,
they
or
didn't.
You just lost those days?
They didn't have school, and I don't remember how that was made up in 1936.
Well, if you were just first grade, we can see why. We can stop this.
Thank
Do you want
you.
me to stop it?
Yes, please.
Working. How did the day's experiences vary between the grade levels?
We had a lot more responsibility, of course, as you got older. As I mentioned before, we got to help the younger ones. We also helped them get dressed, help the little ones with their boots and their clothes and zip up and all those kind of things. We had more, it was more like a family. And it, a good community. It was just marvelous. When you look back now, you didn't think much of it at that time, but now when I look back, and when I taught school then, it was, of course, I taught first and second, my first 2 years of teaching, in a consolidated school, so that, of course, everything was modern by then, and that was 1948 was my first teaching job. And we had electricity and all those kind of things in the consolidated school. So, but in the country school, you had to do a lot of things. Oh, and then at night after when the teacher would dismiss us, she would choose maybe 2 children to clean the erasers and to help clean up, and oh, that was a real privilege. You just hoped that she would call your name and that you got to help. She was really good about that because I know she kept track of who got to help and so forth. And looking back, I don't remember very many discipline problems. She always took care of them well, and I think we helped with that. If we knew that a child was doing something, like when we were in 7th and 8th grade, I think we kind of helped with that, we older children. And because I don't really remember anyone being extremely disruptive at all. And in those days, of course, we respected what the teacher said. That was it. I mean, she knew everything, and don't say anything. I mean, she knew everything, and we really respected her. So,
Now, I'm wondering how many students were in your grade, and you said as a 2nd grader, you were the only 2nd grader.
Yes.
But then you were in a different school, and
Yes.
then there were 5 of you.
Well, when I went to 3rd grade at Kuhn number 8, I think there were 3 or 4 of us in that grade then. But then I was only there a couple years, and then we moved to the other school, and there were 5 of us then. And there were 5 all the way through, like from 4th through 8th.
Do you remember how many would have been in your whole school?
I think it was up in the teens. Let's see. Probably about 18, 19. I don't think we had over 20. Next time, I'm going to, for my own information, I'm going to find that picture I took to the Buena Vista County Historical Society of our grade school. And I didn't realize, I grew early. When I was 12 years old, I started high school. And I looked at this picture. We had a scrap drive. Of course, this is wartime now. And everybody was supposed to bring newspapers. Collect all the newspapers. And we had this huge mound of newspapers in front of the schoolhouse. And there was a teacher, and then over on this other side is a big girl, and here are all the kids. And then that big girl, I realized, was me. I never knew that. I was that much bigger than everyone else. And so, yes, it was, we did a lot of things like that, like collecting.
What would they have done with the newspapers?
It was for the war effort. I don't know if they used it in ammunition or what they used it for. I really don't know. That's an interesting thing. I should look that up. Why? And then, of course, iron. Everybody, that was for melting down, for making things. And, and then the ration books. I ran across those and took those to the Historical Society too, because you couldn't have sugar unless you had the stamps, tires, gas, butter, and then that's when Oleos came about. You got these little packs of margarine, and then there was a little yellow tablet in there, and then you squeezed it, and then you mixed it up, and then you had it looked like yellow butter. But we didn't use too much of that, because on the farm then we made our own butter, our own cottage cheese, our milk. That Mom always made cottage cheese, and in Germany called it Quark, and she'd put it in. She'd put this clobbered milk. It gets. You get it at certain temperatures and it clabbers, we call it, and put it in a big cheesecloth and hang it behind the stove and a pan underneath, and all dripped out, and I don't remember how long we had it hanging there. And then she'd take it and put it in a bowl, and mix it up, and then you'd have your cottage cheese, and then she always put onions and salt and pepper in there. And, oh, it was the best stuff.
Do you remember any particular lessons or activities that were special?
I always loved music. Special activities. Some of her, she had a few really neat art. Oh, yes, our Christmas program. Oh, my goodness. That was quite a deal. We put a wire up in the front across and hung sheets on there. And we all had to say our pieces and put on a little play. The boys always had robes for the three wise men, bathrobes from their fathers at home. And oh my goodness, that was quite a deal. Angels, I know one time we made wings. That was in our class. I can't remember I thought it was paper, but I'm not sure. It might have been cloth. And the teacher was so innovative, and she always supplied everything. I mean, the poor teacher didn't make much in money, and I'm sure she spent money on just teaching. And another thing, community meetings, yes, at night. I don't remember if it was once a month. I don't think quite that often. But the parents it's probably maybe 3 or 4 times a year. But then we would say pieces for that too, recite pieces. There we didn't have a curtain and all that. That was just at the front of this building. So the parents could hear us. And so, okay. And that was, and then sometimes, we had a basket social once in a while. That would be where people would bring food, and then I think that was to make money. And then people would bid on it. Wouldn't bid very much because people didn't have much money. Let's see, in the maypole dance, we didn't do much for Halloween and Maybasket Day. We made Maybaskets. Lots of times we'd weave our paper strips together and make a little basket out of that. Or we made some out of construction paper cones, like a cone with a pipe cleaner for a handle, things like that. The art things. Christmas was a neat time. We always had some kind of a Christmas program. And that's about, and then the school picnic at the end of the year. That was a big deal. Everybody came for that. And they put out tables outside. I can't remember how we did that for sure, because we didn't have big tables at the school. I don't know. Oh, I think they put planks over sawhorses. That's right. And a sheet over that, and then put the food there and on the shady side of this building. And I think those were about the main extracurricular things we did. Of course, we played ball all the time.
Baseball?
Baseball, workup, or softball, I can't remember which was. And then we also bounce ball, Later years they called it Foursquare, but we never called that Foursquare.
You invented it?
I didn't even know it. And then, of course, hopscotch. We had one piece of cement right in the front of this to go up into the school, and there we'd do a hopscotch. Oh, and then the boys played marbles a lot in the springtime, and the girls jumped jacks. I never had a jack set for some reason. I don't know why. But there were a couple girls that were really, really good at that. But I remember they'd share and we'd play. But I never had my own jack set, I don't think.
Which subjects were your favorites?
I think geography. And my husband and I have traveled a lot. We both love geography. And, of course, anything with reading. History I like too. I never cared much for English or math. I think it's partly because of the one teacher that didn't, if you got your math problem wrong and she couldn't explain what was wrong, that kind of turned you off a little bit. Why did she mark it wrong then if she didn't know how to do it? And English, I struggled with that clear through college. The learning all the verbs and nouns, that I could get, but then when you got deeper into it, the subjective and all those kind of things, I never was real good at that.
How much did you interact with others during your lessons? If you had 5 children in your class.
Oh, yes. Really, really well. She'd call on you, and if you didn't know it, she'd call on the next. And then, but we never made fun of anybody or anything. I don't know. We were all fairly good. When I look back, all 5 of us were fairly good students. And, I look back that whole school, and no one kept anyone home. I don't remember a really bad student, what you call bad. There were a couple that were slower, but I don't mean bad, I mean a poor student is what I meant. There wasn't anybody with autism or any of those kind of things. And even when I was teaching, and I taught clear up to, 76, I don't remember, I never had an autistic student that I knew of. You had your slow children, and then usually boys, and it was mostly maturity, because when you're teaching 1st or 2nd grade, they mature at different ages, and very seldom did you have a girl in your slow class. Once in a while you did, but they weren't ignorant. It was just they were slower, and I know I kept one little boy back. One of the best things I ever did, because he just blossomed the next year, because he just wasn't ready. And you could tell them early in the year, but no one ever took them out and put them back in kindergarten or anything, which should have been done, really. Now perhaps they screen them better for maturity, I don't know. But I usually, let's see, one year I taught 1st grade and I had 33 1st graders with no help of any kind. And I had one child that was held back, and it wasn't because of his knowledge, it was because he was a problem. And if I didn't corner him the minute he came in the door, he was running across the top of desks or something. He was one of my 33. That was a bad time.
Did the teacher ever have any helpers?
No, never.
Do you remember any classroom rules?
Oh yes, we always had about 4 or 5 main ones that you couldn't leave your desk without permission, raise your hand before you speak, be polite, like say please and thank you. She taught good manners as well as your teachers did that in those days. Good manners as well as knowledge of things. those are, I can't remember any other rules. Of course, each one had their different things, but be courteous, I suppose, would be one.
Maybe something about using the outhouse?
Oh, yes. You raised one finger to number one, two fingers if you had a bigger job. And I suppose she did that because she'd know how long it took you. And, if you just wanted to goof around, that wasn't it. And you had to get dressed and go clear out to the outhouse. And in the wintertime, you didn't ask to go unless you really had to.
You've mentioned that there really wasn't much discipline problem. Do you
No.
think? And you said that the older students would help with the younger
Yes.
students.
Yeah.
Would you say that your teacher had any techniques to enforce her rules?
Oh my, yes. She had techniques sometimes I wish I would have had. But you could discipline with a paddling or something too. I never saw her ever do that. I never saw any of them do that. But there was always that threat. And another difference was if you got in trouble at school, you got in trouble at home, which is not, I don't think, the case anymore. And that has a terrific influence on a child not to misbehave. Boy, I wouldn't want to do that. My dad would have given me such a whipping. I never did. I was always good at school.
How did you get the teacher's attention if you needed to ask a question?
Just raise your hand. Just raise your hand.
How did you know it was time for lunch?
You were hungry. No, the teacher said, okay, in 5 minutes, be ready to finish up what you're doing because it'll be lunchtime. And then when everybody was through putting things away and all this, then it was time for lunch. Then she would call rows. You don't just all jump up and go. She'd call rows for different people to do different things, and you go get your lunch, and then you brought it back to your seat and ate lunch at your desk.
Did you ever eat outside in nice weather?
Oh yes, when it was really nice. Oh my, yes, that was one thing too. We had a creek. We called it the creek. Not very far from the school, and so one time we got to do an outing, and we've had 2 different times. One time we went down by the creek and found like wildflowers and see what we could say about spring, the weather type things. Then one time we walked 2 miles over to the other school. And we all walked over there, and they put on like a little program for us, and then we walked back. That was 4 miles. Then let's see, I walked to school 1.5 miles and walked home 1.5 miles. 7 miles that day. We didn't think anything of it. That's what you did.
Where did you keep these lunch pails that you carried?
Back in the cloakroom. We kept our lunch pails in the cloakroom. And there was a shelf up above, and because your boots and things were on the floor. And goodness, I think that must have been kind of a mess. That's those snow boots and everything on the floor.
For the little farm?
Yeah.
How would you say that your meal compared with what the other students brought?
Oh, some of them brought some town bread, and some of them brought like not Twinkies, but something like that. We never had any of that. But I never minded Mom always made a good, like, cheese and sausage sandwich, and a pickle. I love to this day. I love dill pickles, and she made really good dill pickles, and an apple, and once in a while. Oh, I'll never forget the only birthday present I ever remember. I was 7 years old. Came home from school that night, and I opened the door, and my birthday's in December. Keep that in mind. I opened the door and I said, "I smell bananas." And I just loved bananas. I still to this day. And here that was my birthday present, like 4 or 5 bananas. Well, I think in those days, in December, everybody didn't have bananas because they had to be shipped in and not frozen, all these things. So in those days, they weren't so plentiful. So here my dad went to town and got bananas for me for my birthday. That's the only present I ever remember getting.
Did you share them? Did you eat them all yourself?
They were all for me, and I think I shared them. I really can't remember. I only remember getting those, and then because my brother was born then. No, I was 7, and he was born in February after that. That's right.
How long was lunchtime?
An hour. We always had an hour. So you'd eat your lunch so you could go out to recess and play the rest of the time. Or if you had, well, that's another thing. If you didn't get your work completed, you would stay in at noontime until you got your work done if it was something that you were expected to do and get that done before you went out to play. And the teacher had that, my goodness, I look back at that, she had to be playground supervisor. She had to do everything. And then sometimes, she'd always choose, that's right, I've forgotten that. She always chose a couple kids to be monitor outside too. And that was a special deal. But she had to be careful because you didn't want to, like, squeal on anybody. It had to be something that was worth telling about. You shouldn't be a tattletale. We learned that too. Don't be just a tattletale. But if something really needs to be let the teacher know about, then you had to go and let her know.
How did the school day end?
Let's see, what did we do at the end? I don't think we said a prayer. We always said something, and I can't remember. Because in the morning we said the pledge. I really don't remember. I've forgotten.
You've done very well. Well, let's talk about your teachers.
Mm-hmm.
For each grade. Can you tell me the teachers' names for each grade?
Well, should I say the one I didn't like?
Well, maybe we won't say
Maybe we won't say that.
First grade you didn't like.
That's right.
That'll be enough.
Okay. And then Miss Jensen was the one at
the
Coon.
Rest of first grade.
Yes, that really taught me how to read. She was so wonderful. And then it skipped second and third. Then I was in fourth until March.
So Miss Jensen would have taught you third.
Yes.
Okay.
And fourth until March when my parents moved to this other farm, to Grant Township. We were there 18 years on that farm.
Okay.
But then Miss Leonard was my teacher from 4th through 7th. And then, Miss Vivian Anderson, 8th grade. She was fantastic. She taught us more in that year than... And actually, we stayed in a lot of recesses, we 8th graders, to catch up on so many things. And she knew she couldn't do it and we always got on in May. Oh, and we always had... Did we always have corn picking vacation? I can't remember. When I taught school at Fairview Consolidated, One year there was a horrible wind in October or early November. And so we actually dismissed school and went to farms and helped them pick corn up off of the ground. Bushels of corn. Because that was a terrible, terrible wind and it knocked the corn off the stalks. And that's when I was teaching. That was in either 48 or 49. And so, okay, then in high school, of course, you have several teachers. And
is there anything you can tell me about? We've talked about your awesome Miss Jensen.
Yes.
and Miss Anderson.
Yes.
About their teaching styles, or
they were positive. They were absolutely. I don't think I ever heard of put a child down, make fun of anybody, any of that, because, well, the children just don't perform if you do that. I found that out. I mean, I really did role model after those two because it made such an impression on me that you get so much more out of a child when you praise them, but don't ever praise them for regular things that you're expected. Praise them for beyond things. So I think nowadays everything is good job till they don't know what a bad job is, and so that's something children have to learn.
Where did your teachers live?
Okay, the first 2 years at the Consolidated School, I lived in the teacherage. There was a house. This school, this Consolidated School, went from first grade through high school, and it was out in the country. And then there was a janitor's house, the bus barns, and then here was another house. The superintendent lived in the bottom, and we teachers, there were 3 of us. Then there was a man teacher. He lived out in the neighborhood with another family. And then the 3 of us lived upstairs, and then one of them drove. Let's see, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. Okay. Now the high school teachers, the superintendent taught, his wife taught. I don't know how many teachers they had in high school. Only about 3, I think, or 4. That's funny, I've forgotten that. But we grade school teachers all stayed there.
When you were in rural school, did you ever see your teachers outside of the school day?
Not really, except for those community meetings and that type of thing. No, we really didn't. They stayed in the neighborhood, usually with some family. Some of them nearby, but actually the one from Miss Leonard, I think she drove every day from somewhere, I don't know where. She drove a car. One from the 4th to 7th grade at Grant number 4 school. I don't know where Miss Jensen did. I was too little to pay attention then, I guess. And Miss Anderson stayed with one of the neighbors. Mm-hmm.
You talked about what the students did to help take care of the schoolhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Did the teacher have other helpers for helping her take care
No.
of the schoolhouse?
She was the janitor and everything. I mean, it was amazing when you think of it. She had to know how to bank a fire, because she hoped there would be a few embers left in the morning when she came to school to help start it up again.
Did you have to take in, then we've talked about the 8th grade exam already.
Yes.
And we've talked some about preparing for it, that you
Mhm.
even gave up your recesses
Mhm.
and worked really, really hard. Do you have any, and 3 days to take the test? Do you have any memories of those 3 days?
It was scary because your folks had to take you to town, and then you went into the courthouse and up these steps up to this big room, and it was quite frightening in some ways. But then, of course, you had to tell yourself, now I'm going to go to high school, and I'm a big girl. You know, you had to do things that were kind of frightening, and that was kind of a good experience. I still think it's a wonderful idea. To this day, I wish they would give exams to third graders, because you've covered all of your basic reading by that time. And if you are having lots of problems, if you could have a transition room, you don't take third grade over, you have a transition room where you pick up all the skills that you have not gotten. I think that would be such a help to education. But then that's just my idea.
Did you have an 8th grade graduation ceremony?
No, not really. I can't remember that.
Would this have been during the war?
Yes. And also, what you got, then you just got what happened if your grades in the mail, and say that you are promoted to 9th grade. So that's beside your report card that you got from your teacher. Now this came then from the county.
Did all 5 of you pass?
Yes, we did.
Did you all go to high school?
Yes, we did.
Was that unusual?
I don't know. I really... See, this is 1942. By that time, I don't remember anyone not going to high school. Well, there was a German settlement. Yes, there were some kids that didn't go to high school. Just east of us. And they went to Zion Lutheran School, and they got a darn good education. But I know some of them had the girls go and work, and still at that time, not too much longer than that though, everyone went to high school.
What did you do after graduation?
From high school?
From
8th grade?
Yeah, so then you went to high school.
Yes, and I went on to high school. Worked at home, of course, during the summers. Did field work and everything, and regular.
Did you board in town all 4 years of high
Yes,
school?
I did. The first year, I stayed with some people that they had adopted a little boy. And now I'm 12 years old. I remember getting up like before 6 in the morning and doing laundry on Mondays, going to school with these stinky Clorox hands. I'll never forget that. And and hang out the clothes, all that kind of stuff. Then come home and then sprinkle. Oh, the husband was a traveling salesman, so that meant about 8 white shirts a week, and I had to sprinkle those and iron them just so. I hated to iron to this day. I used to like ironing at home for Mom, but oh boy, that was such a thing. And then scrub floors, and I'll never forget the lady said she was in another room talking on the telephone, and you could tell somebody asked what oh, I'm so busy mopping the floor. I was on my hands and knees mopping the floor in the kitchen. That made me so angry. And she didn't feel good a lot of the time. But boy, on Thursday nights she could go to her Eastern Star and things like that. Anyhow, and then I went home on weekends, and that year, every Sunday afternoon, about 4 o'clock, I'd start getting a stomach ache. I hated to go back so badly. Back to town. Dad would take me into town. So, end of that year, I said I didn't want to go and work for those people anymore, and Dad said, oh, yeah, that's fine. Well, then here these other people, they wanted a girl for 1 year, sophomore year, because she was going to have an operation, so she wanted everything. They had one daughter, 3rd grade, and she was a delight, and the place was so wonderful, and the man had already retired, and he would help with the laundry and everything, and and I lived upstairs in there, and they had an apartment there for his sister in the south part. I had my own bedroom and I had my own bathroom because that lady only came home on weekends and then I was home on weekends. It was marvelous. And my grades went up and it was just great because I had time to study. But they only needed somebody for 1 year. And so the next year I got a job at this veterinarian. And they had 3 children. I heard her say once, you don't have to do everything Marianne tells you to do. And they were, I would say, ornery little children, especially the 4-year-old. Well, I'd help in the morning, then I'd go to school, then I'd come home during noon hour, because it was only 8 or 10 blocks, something like that, and come home, help with lunch, at lunch, and do the dishes and get back to school, because we always had an hour lunchtime in those days. And then come home at night and, work and everything. Well, I was home one noon and the little boy got so angry about something, and he threw a glass through the plate, threw a apple through the plate glass window, but thank heavens they were there. Oh my God, because it was on them. So things like that went on. Well, then in March, during the noon hour every week, about on Thursday, she'd want me to wash her hair during the noon hour and put it up in pin curls. So sometimes she wanted it this direction and sometimes she wanted that direction. So this day I started asking her which way. Shut up! Can't you tell we're listening to President Roosevelt's speech? Oh boy, I screwed up her hair. And I went to school. I called my dad. I said, Dad, I don't want to stay here anymore. I've just had it. He said, I'll be in tomorrow night, Friday night. He came in and took me away. And in the meantime, he found this lady that lived down by the lake. And she was all by herself, a widow lady, in this little bungalow. And I stayed there from March then till May in my junior year. Oh my gosh. All I had to do was clean the bird cage and vacuum and do this little bit of laundry. My grades went up. Boy, it was just a wonderful, wonderful time. Then the next 3 years I worked for her son and daughter-in-law for my senior year and the 2 years in college. And they were like family. They were just wonderful people.
So you went to Buena Vista?
Yes, for 2 years. I got a 2-year teacher training course, and then later on, then when I taught at Clear Lake my 3rd year, I went to Mason City and took some courses. I remember tests and measurements was one of the courses, and so I picked up at least 6 more hours, and then we got married, moved to Georgia, and then moved back, and then when our youngest son was 4, I started back night school, day school, summer school to get my degree. Yeah.
Did it the hard way.
Uh-huh.
Can you think of any way the community politics affected the operation of the school?
Let's see, who was our school board? I think the school board president has a lot to do with, because he hires the teacher, and I guess if anything would come up, he would have to be the one to take care, the politics. I don't recall there was much of that in our school. in the country schools. I imagine there could be. Imagine if the school board president had children in school, and I don't know if there'd be shown any favoritism or not. I wasn't aware of any of that. I can't really remember who the school board president was when I was in school. So that probably was a good thing.
Did you have much homework from country school?
Not a lot. Although it seems like we did take something home almost every day. And then, of course, we did that, the lamp on the dining room table, and then I think probably the worst thing was doing long division problems in math. Oh, that was so foolish. If you knew how to do, well, I taught 6th grade one year, and in Catholic school in Stormwick, and those books were horrendous. I would choose a certain number of problems for them to do, 1 through 6, and then that's it. Not do this whole page over and over and over. If you knew how to do those and do them correctly, you knew it. So, I mean, that was so foolish. I think sometimes, you just agonized over that. So,
we've talked about the war. Can you think of other major local, national, or world events that happened during your childhood?
well, of course, I remember it was a Sunday, December 7th, 1941. We were sitting my father was a musician in Germany. Well, he was in the German army, and his brother over here was in the American army, and he sponsored him to come over after the World War I. And so then Dad came over, and so the only thing he knew then was to, farming and so forth. But he did play in the municipal band, and actually Carl King from Fort Dodge asked Dad to come and play trombone when he needed a trombonist. So we always listened to the opera every Sunday afternoon on the radio, and I love opera to this day because Dad knew the stories, and he'd tell the story, and then you knew what was happening, and it was just marvelous. So we were listening opera, and Madame Schumann-Heink was singing, and they broke in and said that Pearl Harbor has been attacked. And so we quickly got a map, and where's Pearl Harbor and where are the Wild Lands, and got a map out and found it and everything. And that was such a traumatic time. Oh my! And then war bonds, drives, and scrap drives, and all these things, and everyone took everything into stride. Nobody complained. Well, some people complained, I guess, but they always complain. There are a few that always complain about everything, no matter what. But no, you didn't hear much complaints, and I know, like, Mom made a lot of things, use honey instead of sugar, and you just made do. But we on the farm were so lucky because, we raised our own food and canned a lot of food, and so we always had a lot of food. The people in town had it a little harder because they had to buy everything, and so what was the question again?
Well, we've been talking about major events in the community,
yes.
or state or national or world.
Well, then I know, let's see, Governor Blue came to town. That was a big deal. One of my friends' brother was in the Air Force, and he got reprimanded for this. He flew his P-38 down Main Street, buzzed Storm Lake, and that was kind of a bad thing. But I remember that was so exciting because I was there and saw it. And let's see, football games. Oh my, those were wonderful times in high school. And let's see, Sweezy's was it 5 or 10-cent hamburgers? I can't remember. 5-cent hamburgers, 10-cent hamburgers. They were the best hamburgers. That was a special treat. See, people didn't eat out in those days. I mean, oh, that was such a treat if you ever ate out. That was a big deal. I know a lot of the kids would stop down to the drugstore after school on the way home in high school, but of course I never had any money and I had to get home and work at where I was staying, so I never got to do that. But that was a big deal, what the kids used to do. And that was in the drugstore where the floors were like black and white little check, let's see, ceramic tile, that little tiny, and then they had the little ice cream chairs and tables and that type of thing. And then the sugar bowl they had, that was one place that they had little booths that the kids would sit in. And then I think when I was in high school, and I never had one, but I think they invented like cherry Coke or something like that. Coca-Cola with some cherry flavoring in it. Of course, I don't like sweets, so that never, I don't think I ever had a cherry Coke. Let's see, some other big happenings. Of course, prom. Let's see, my first junior prom. Somebody let me wear their dress. I can't even remember. I had a borrowed, I never had a dress on my own, but I borrowed a prom dress a couple times. And then in college, I never had one. The first formal dress I ever had was when I taught school the first year, and we were invited to the junior, senior, all the teachers were invited to junior, senior prom. And I got a prom dress, and it was white piqué, and it had big yellow, brown, and brown flowers with some blue. I donated it. I kept it all these years. We would have been married 62 years now. I kept all these years and donated it here to the department here in Waverly, to their dramatic department. Kept that all these years, I guess, because it was my first one.
Well, that sort of leads into how did the Depression affect the school?
Oh, yes. Well, you saved everything. I know one of the coats I had, a neighbor lady cut down a big old coat for, we didn't have the nice warm clothes the kids do nowadays. It was a heavy coat too. It was woolen and then a silky lining, and cut it way down for me. And that coat never was very warm when I look back. But the Depression just really impressed on you too. You don't buy anything unless you can pay for it. I learned really, I'm such a saver, and I don't ever pay like full price for anything. When I was about, let's see, my brother, I must have been 9 or 10 years old. My brother was a little boy, like 2 or 3 years old. And it was Christmas time. And Dad gave me a little bit of money. And I remember going down to the Ben Franklin store and went to the basement, and this darling little truck, I knew he would just love it. But it was too much. It was like $3 or something like that. I didn't have that. So, but this was 2 or 3 weeks before Christmas. Well, then the next Saturday when Dad went to town to get groceries, I got to go along and went down there. I didn't know what to do. So the last Saturday before Christmas we went there. It was on sale for $1. I was so tickled, and that started my whole career of saving money. If you wait long enough, or I only go to clearance, not just for sale. That started that whole thing, but it it stems way back from the Depression, when you never had anything really, and when you did have something, you wanted to make do. You wanted to make it count. So I guess that's a whole lifelong. And I won't throw food away. I'll have a little dab of this, a little dab of that, and put it in a soup or something. Use it. You can't throw food away. Those kind of things you learn from not having much.
You talked about different things that went on at the school.
Mm-hmm.
Was it ever used as a polling place to vote? Do you think?
It must have been. They must have voted there, because where else would they have? Unless in Grant Township. I really can't answer that question, because I don't remember. At the Historical Society, we have some of those booths that were made out of canvas and that type of, and I don't remember them at school, but I know my parents voted every time. That was such a wonderful thing. They taught us, boy, this is a wonderful country, and your responsibility is to vote. So we still vote always, because you aren't allowed to vote in a lot of countries. So
how far was it that you lived from town, that you boarded?
it was like 8.5 miles. It wasn't all that far but
if there's not
you
money
couldn't
for
afford-
gas,
yeah,
or if there's not
yeah.
gas.
So
What was your favorite part of the school day at country school?
at country school, I guess reading. And then when you had time, you could get a library book. I think that was probably, I remember, and really I love geography. Learning about other countries, other places in the world. Maybe that's because my parents came from a far off place, I don't know, but that was...
Do you have any bad memories of country school?
No, well, you talk about bullying. One time, I don't know why, the kids, the first farm on the way home were 3 kids. And then way down by us were 2. But for some reason, some of the other kids came with them. I guess I must have been last out of school. Maybe I stayed and helped that night. They made a line across the road and wouldn't let me go by. Oh, and I was a really fast runner. And so I tried getting by and wouldn't get by. Well, then I went home and I was crying and all this and that. Well, then nothing was done. Then they did it again. Well, then I told the teacher. That ended that. They never did that again. Things like, but that helps you grow up too. Realizing that, yes, you can tell somebody and they'll do something about it. And any other kind of things? But so, when they talk about bullying, I guess I was bullied.
And when you were called a Nazi, was that high school or was that country
that was
school?
horrendous. I really cried. I don't remember, I don't know if Dad went to school or not, but I don't ever remember it happening again. They said that once and I was just devastated.
And was that in grade school?
Yeah, that was in country school. Yeah, that was in Grant number 4. And here's some of those kids didn't have near the patriotism that I did, because they were here a long many years and didn't think so much about it. That's what I guess bothered me so, because I thought I'm a good American.
What lessons from country schools might we benefit from today?
I think more working together, like as a community, respecting other people, helping others. I think you really learn to be, different ages. You're more concerned with other people of different ages because you're with them every day, all the time. And that's kind of too bad when you're all separated in your own separate age group. You really don't have that interaction that you do in a country school. Yeah, the feeling of community, I think that's probably...
Are there any disadvantages to country school?
Disadvantages. I really can't think of any because I don't know what advantages